Hello and welcome to the Tech and Sports Podcast. Tech and Sports is a show about how technology is revolutionizing all of the major sports as well as health and fitness. You can find it on your podcast service of choice. My name is Alex Radu and I'm here with the one and only Mandy Kovacs.
Hello everyone.
This week we spoke to a Toronto sports tech company called GForceTracker about head injuries and injury prevention, plus all the biggest news from the last week, new apps or wearables, and your weekly concussion update. But before we get to that, we would really appreciate it if you would review and rate the Tech and Sports Podcast on iTunes and Google Play, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. It really does help us grow the show, and we really appreciate all the support so far. And with that, sit back and relax, because the Tech and Sports crew is entering the game. All right, Mandy, the news.
Alrighty, so first up is news that the NBA and Intel have teamed up for a new multi-year initiative to invest in tech startups that blend sports and entertainment. The president of Intel's global investment branch, Wendell Brooks, says that they're doing this because there's been more disruption in the sports tech space in the last 5 years than in the 70 years before that. Investments will range from hundreds of thousands of dollars for proof of concept ideas to millions for developed ideas or even the possibility of acquisitions down the line. So stay tuned because there may be some big things coming from both the NBA and the Intel.
Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing to talk about here other than the fact that it's going to happen. I mean, Who knows what they're going to do with it?
Yeah, who knows? All right, next we have some pretty ridiculous drama that I actually find personally hilarious. So Boston Red Sox starting pitcher David Price, who's also one of the highest paid pitchers in the entire league, missed his last start due to minor carpal tunnel, which was caused by playing video games. Apparently, Price is obsessed with Fortnite and often talks about how he stays up until like 2 a.m. to play the game, but now people are starting to question whether his carpal tunnel has gotten worse because of his video game habits. He swears that the two are unrelated, and so does the Red Sox manager, but of course people are skeptical. And now Price has actually come forward saying that he won't play the game as frequently anymore, especially when he's at the ballpark. We try to avoid esports news like this, but because it's not really tech, but I had to include it because it's quite ridiculous.
I mean, like, let's be real here. It's not like it's causing carpal tunnel. I mean, and I say that just because there are so many like athletes who are playing Fortnite and who are streaming Fortnite or other types of games. Like, you have so many, like, basketball stars who are just, like, straight video game streaming all the time.
But so I feel like it's different for a pitcher, though, because their hands are so important to what they do, and they are very sensitive. Like, you hear about pitchers all the time getting, like, Tommy John surgery, had to have ligaments removed from their forearms and hands and stuff, that I wonder if maybe it didn't cause it, but maybe it is helping it get worse. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, like,
we're not doctors.
the science behind, like, hand muscles and how that affects pitchers. So you know what? Actually, maybe with pitchers, it might not be great, especially because now he's saying that he's not going to.
Yeah, so like he said that he won't play anymore, especially at the ballpark.
Yeah, but I mean, like, we'll have to see too, though, because so many of these teams are using it as, like, you know, games and all that as just a way for them to bond as well. So I don't know. We'll see. That is interesting.
Actually, the Brewers, I saw the other day, they actually had, I don't remember what game it was. I think it was Overwatch, maybe. They had it actually on the Jumbotron before a game, and they were all sitting in, like, the first row of the stands playing each other on the Jumbotron.
That's incredible.
I know, and I thought that was amazing.
That is incredible. I mean, like, you had one of the best basketball moments from this season was Ben Simmons streaming Public Battlegrounds, which is similar to Fortnite. And Karl Anthony Towns came on as just like, hey, I have to go to sleep. We got a game tomorrow. And he's just like, who are you guys playing? We're like, the Hawks. And he's like, you don't need to go to sleep. So
that's amazing.
There's some great moments that are happening with
I love
with these young athletes in video games. So, I mean, yeah, this is just a fun story.
Yeah, it's entertaining to us. And now some local news really quickly. A sport tech startup called SportLogic has officially opened an artificial intelligence lab in the Kitchener-Waterloo area of southern Ontario to increase its research into how AI can help sports. So this is a Montreal-based company, and they use AI to power its analytics platform, and they work with teams across the MLS and the Premier League. And so last year, they actually received $5 million in funding to expand into Europe, and as a result, this new AI lab in Waterloo will be completely devoted to soccer and European football research. SportLogic is hiring for the lab as well and hopes to have around 12 team members by the end of the year. It chose Waterloo because, for those of you who aren't familiar, the city is home to a couple top universities. as well as tech companies like BlackBerry. So it's really quite an innovation hub within the province.
Yeah, I mean, this is first and foremost a great example of the Waterloo-Toronto corridor and just being a great place for startups and stuff like that. And second, it just shows how a lot of companies are using soccer as the way that they're testing sort of things. I mean, we spoke with, as our discussion, with a Dutch startup a few weeks ago, and how they are basically, changing sports teams with their data. So it's cool to see this happening here in Canada as well.
Why do you think they're all choosing soccer? Do you think it's just because it requires the least amount of equipment?
No, I think it's soccer's the biggest sport in the world.
True.
So if they're going to grow globally, it's the easiest sport.
On your list. Yeah, that's fair. Okay, and then now we're going to go down under. The Australian Soccer Championship was last weekend, and apparently a technical malfunction with the video review system was to blame for the incorrect awarding of a goal that ended up being the game winner. So Australian fans watching on TV saw that the player was clearly offside while setting up the goal that put the Melbourne Victory up 1-0 over the Newcastle Jets. The video system didn't have access to the same footage TV viewers saw, apparently, and that's how it missed the blatant offside. So the league was using the Hawkeye software used in professional tennis, but it lost its connection for just a few seconds before the goal, and so by the time the error was actually noticed, it was too late to change the decision, and the championship title was awarded to Melbourne. So the league has said that it's extremely disappointed with the failure of the technology, especially at such a crucial time, but it won't go back on the decision. So this failure means that Newcastle was denied its chance to go from last place last season to complete league champions in its first final in a decade. It also raises concerns about the World Cup in Russia next month because video replay technology has been confirmed for its use for the first time ever.
I mean, I have to also wonder if it's just the infrastructure here that's terrible in, the stadium. Just because, this has never happened in tennis.
Right.
And also...
that we know of, though.
Yeah. Also, or, you don't see, huge failures in systems like this in basketball or hockey or...
Right.
Or baseball or anything. I think it's just kind of a poor... execution of just the whole infrastructure to the technology, because also... And it's also, a complete failure of... how the system works, because are they do they still not have linesmen and all that? Because in tennis, if you had if the system went down, you would rely on the two people who are watching that line.
Right. Yeah, so, I don't know. They definitely have to have linesmen there. So I don't know why they wouldn't. If it was as blatant as people say it is, how did they not catch it? Yeah.
So and you also have to wonder. I mean, is the system? If this were to happen in the NHL, for instance, I mean, we would know on Twitter almost immediately that it was down, and they would still be reviewing all the TV footage. So
they would have other options.
Yeah, so I wonder if it's just a complete failure in infrastructure and just execution on it, rather than, because again, this is the first time I'm hearing about this type of absolute failure in this manner when it comes to video replay, and the fact that it just straight didn't work.
This is the first time first time we've ever covered something failing this badly, and it says it was a lost connection, meaning that you're right, it's probably an infrastructure Wi-Fi type of problem, which is not necessarily the video technology's fault.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just it's not it was a human interpretation of that video that was wrong. This was just the connection cutting out. So I don't think you would hope that in the World Cup that's not a problem, and that they would build, because these are all newer stadiums too, so they should hopefully have better infrastructure in place.
Right. I think the key here was that by the time they actually noticed that problem, they'd already moved on. And I mean, like in hockey, you're not going to call a goal back 10 minutes later when the play has already moved on, right? So I think that was the issue here, is that they caught it too late, so they probably should have noticed the incident earlier.
Yeah, I mean...
which is human error.
Yeah, I guess so we'll see. Yeah.
All right, moving on. Nike has launched a partnership with Facebook that will allow shoppers to take an augmented reality look at pairs of limited edition sneakers before they decide to buy them. So this was announced at Facebook's F8 developer conference last week, and the feature uses Facebook's Messenger app, which is aiming to use augmented reality to help brands reach out to customers. So shoppers using Messenger can currently link their sneakers account to the app and reveal Kyrie Irving's Kyrie 4 red carpet sneakers using an emoji passcode. So the shoes appear on a virtual platform and can be viewed from any number of angles and also shared with friends and family. However, if you want the shoe, it's actually been sold out for quite a while now, so you may not get your hands on one anytime soon. Okay, and next we're going to move on to news coming out of Villanova. So apparently the school's baseball team is using virtual reality to train and improve at the plate. The program they're using was actually developed and built by a baseball-loving Villanova professor, Dr. Mark Jupina, called The Cave, and it's set up in a section of their library. So a 3D ballpark is projected onto the library's walls, and players wear VR headsets to practice. The program combines sensors, infrared cameras, a projector, software, and MLB analytics, and can basically reproduce any pitch by any big league player, and even augment its speed. It's not meant to help a player improve their contact or swing, actually, but instead it's supposed to help them develop better pitch and location recognition, which is really an interesting take on VR.
You see, I really like this because we always talk about how tech's not necessarily going to radically change how athletes are doing stuff because you still need to be good at the actual sport, but it can help with like all the tiny little details. Like you can get, yeah, exactly. Like you can, like just understanding pitch and location recognition. Like I'm sure that's not, one of the top like 3 things maybe you're studying, or you're practicing, but like that's still something that can really help. Just like how basketball players are using tech to find like the perfect angle in their shot. Right. So it's finding those tiny little details that will really help athletes really get better.
Yeah, like I think we've talked about it before, like the time it takes for a pitcher to release the ball from their hand and by the time it gets over the plate and into the catcher's mitt is something like it's less than a second or around a second, right? So players really have a split second literally to decide whether they want to swing, where they want to swing, where they want to hit it. So I think these kinds of skills are definitely very useful.
Well, especially if you were to like, let's say you're in the playoffs in the MLB and you could get by getting all the data just from TV of the team you're playing against and what their pitcher is doing and how they're pitching, and then replicate that in VR, you could potentially just practice against a replication of that person pitching.
Right.
And that could help you just get better and start to recognize their tendencies and their habits a little better just because you've been watching it on TV.
Exactly. Yeah, and these are all kids from Villanova, so maybe they'll make the MLB while some of these pitchers are still playing and be good against them.
For sure.
All right, and then another VR-related story. Apparently, Intel has partnered with panoramic camera maker Atlia Systems to unveil a portable video camera system that enables the live broadcast of 180-degree 4K 3D video. Intel will pair the camera system with its true VR technology so that sports fans can watch their games in virtual reality with a VR headset from Samsung or the Daydream. It's a high resolution and 60 frames per second speed makes it feel like you're actually at the game. And while they haven't specified what games will be available for this, I'm sure more details will emerge and we will keep you updated.
I do have to say, though, that these companies have to stop saying virtual reality because this is just like you getting a better look. I mean, it's like a VR version of 3D videos on YouTube.
It's interactive 3D video.
Yeah, like that's the best way to put it because it's not actual VR. Yeah, because if it was actually VR, you'd be able to, move around and stuff like that. And that requires so many more cameras than just a panoramic camera.
Yeah, I don't think we're really there.
A single seat. So let's just stop calling it VR.
All right, we'll do that. Okay, and now we have news from the West Coast. Team presidents from 6 Bay Area sports teams gathered last Thursday at the San Francisco 49ers Levi's Stadium to share ideas about how technology, analytics, and strategy can advance the success of pro sports in the area. So this is the 49ers' second annual Innovation and Business Strategy Conference, and in attendance was the MLB's Oakland Athletics and San Francisco Giants, as well as the NHL's San Jose Sharks, the NBA's Golden State Warriors, and the MLS's San Jose Earthquakes. The only team missing was the NFL's Oakland Raiders, but they'll be in Vegas in a year, so it doesn't really matter, I guess. And so while some teams in major markets might think other sports are competition, the whole premise of the event was that collaboration is good and a rising tide lifts all boats. So details of what were talked about are obviously scarce, but there were more than 20 speakers and 4 panel discussions from companies like Facebook and Intel over the 2-day conference. Topics included new ticketing methods, plus how data analytics and AI can be used in new business strategies, and apparently esports as well was on the agenda.
See, I love this.
I think it's fantastic.
This is awesome. I love that it's the teams in the Bay Area. Obviously, they have the easiest access to all these executives because they're in Silicon Valley. But this is such a great thing for sports. And you listen to some executives in sports, how you ask them how, are you sharing what you're doing on the business side of things with other teams? Because like you think that, there are these deep rivalries between some of these teams. But the reality is that if everyone's succeeding in a league, the league makes money.
Yeah, and that's a good thing.
So, exactly. So it's such a cool way to see this collaboration come together and happen and share. I mean, like all of these teams, we've talked separately about what they're doing technology-wise.
And they're all quite ahead of most other teams, too.
Exactly, yeah. And they're also, when you look at them, fairly good teams in their respective leagues.
Yeah,
so
it's true.
They've all had some sort of big moment, except I don't know about the MLS team.
The Earthquakes?
The Earthquakes. But,
I'm not sure.
All the other teams have had at least a final appearance, a championship appearance, or whatever in the last 2 decades and have big fan bases. Granted, the Athletics at this point. But I think they're also changing stadiums soon. So it's still very, very interesting to see happen, and it's going to be awesome to see what happens from this in the next couple of years.
Right, like I would love to see this in other places too. Like, I mean, we're based in Toronto. That would be amazing. Toronto is quite a hotbed of innovation and activity. I mean, even New York too. Like, both of these cities have so many teams in there that could easily kind of feed off of each other's energy. I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, and then our last story of the day is really quite fun. Bill Nye, the science guy, was in Toronto for a festival a while back and was able to answer some really cool questions about the science behind sports, like second wins or why Denver teams have really good advantages. I'm going to paraphrase the interview, which was originally done by Donovan Bennett from Sportsnet. So Bill Nye, he says that second wins are definitely a thing because pain while doing a sport like cycling is caused by a buildup of lactate acid, but that can be washed away after a while and the pain recedes, hence creating what athletes call a second wind. He also talked about how Denver teams have a huge home advantage because they're used to playing in a high altitude place. So players in Denver have more red blood cells in their lungs, which causes sleepiness in people who aren't used to it. So while Denver residents will be acclimated to the feeling, visiting players won't be, and that's why they tend to do bad. He also talked about how harmful the pressure altitude is in planes when teams travel, because it's an environment with less oxygen. So just like visiting teams in Denver, it also makes players sleepy. Bill Nye also explained the science behind a curveball by saying that air is a fluid and it sticks to the surface of things like baseballs. So to get a baseball to curve, you need to have the air sticking on one side but being scraped off of the other. So that's why curveballs involve so much spin, because the combination of spinning and moving from being thrown makes the air stagnant on one side but speed up on the other, and the stagnant air pushes the ball towards the high-speed side. He also says baseball is constrained by its own rules, and he would love to see metal bats used by players to see the ball go farther and faster. He predicts that bicycles and skis will continue to get lighter and faster in the future, and expects sports to continue to be dominated less by physical skill and more by scientific advancements going forward.
So that last part is totally something that just a scientist would say.
Oh, probably.
Because it's not like science is going to be a huge part, and technology advancements are going to be a big part of how we understand and train and all that. But your physical human freaks, who are just physical specimens of like gods, basically, are still going to be better at sports then.
Right, but I think we talked about when the Olympics were going on a few months ago that I think there was a New York Times did a really big scientific study and found that athletes for the most part have peaked over the last decade, and records are being broken less frequently and by smaller margins. So I think Bill Nye might be onto something. I think he's saying that we're going to be using a lot more science to help athletes. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was it for our news segment today. Now we're going to move on to new apps and wearables.
All right, so just 2 stories today. So first up, Qualcomm is developing a new processor platform for wearable devices. So this would replace its aging Snapdragon 2100 chip that is in the vast majority of smartwatches currently. So similar to when Qualcomm updates its smartphone chips, we should see a boost in power, and it might allow for smartwatch makers to make smaller watches than some of the bulkier ones we see around as well. So that would be really cool. Plus, we could also see some changes in battery life, which has also at this point been kind of a big pain point when it comes to wearables. Just because if your device is only going to be able to be charged for a day or two, that's not exactly fun to add yet another device that you need to charge.
Yeah, that's not worth it.
Yeah. So obviously Qualcomm is trying to temper expectations here with just its third generation smartwatch chip, but it could dramatically boost the quality of smartwatches releasing in late 2018 and in 2019 if it's successful. Yeah, there's really not too much else to it. This isn't, groundbreaking news, but again, it is really cool to see that companies aren't really bailing too much out of smartwatches rather than more people are investing into it, because it's coming. Like, we're not going to, we talk about it every week. Smartwatches, smart clothing, it's all going to be a thing.
Yeah, I'm just excited to see some improvements.
It could also make things cheaper as well.
Yes.
All right, and then lastly, it's just another report that we have from The Guardian from Australia that found that fitness apps make almost no difference to users' health in most cases. So that's a pretty bold claim, but researchers from Bond University in Queensland examined all the existing credible studies on health apps to see how many showed proven benefits. Ultimately, they saw that the proven effectiveness was of a very low quality, and the lead author of the study said that any app that claims to affect people's health should have evidence to back it up. For example, in the US, some app developers have been fined for making fraudulent claims about health benefits of apps. So, for instance, popular app MyFitnessPal showed no significant reduction in weight loss or behaviors around physical activity and diet when compared to those who don't use the app. Granted, Under Armour, the developer of MyFitnessPal, also says that it's just intended as a tool. So ultimately, with this study, the researchers found that it is just hard to change human behavior in general, and health-related behaviors especially. So evidence is a must, because no matter how many apps you download, it only works if you actually change your behavior. Plus, the study only looked at apps that have had research done on them, so there may be some out there that do indeed work.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting because, like they said, all of these health apps do claim that they make a difference. And I feel like I've even read older reports saying the same thing. So, I don't know. This is bold.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not even that bold, though, because their claim of, it's not just going to fix everything just because you're using it. You do have to buy into it. You can track your calories, but if you go a week without tracking your calories, doesn't mean it's going to work.
No, that's true. And I agree with
poorly.
What they're saying for the most part. It makes sense, right? Because like you said, you need to buy in.
Yeah, and it's not just I'm spending, $60 a month on this, fitness app that supposedly helps. If you don't actually buy into it, then I spend way too much money on my gym membership every month, but I don't actually...
Nope, you haven't come with me
I don't buy into it.
6 months?
So it hasn't changed anything. So that's a good example for this as well.
We are very fit people.
Yes.
All right, well, that's it for our new apps and wearables segment. Now we're going to move on to our concussion update.
All right, so every day, a large portion of athletes with a history of repetitive head trauma are battling with a progressive neurodegenerative brain disease called CTE. Symptoms of CTE include blurred vision, dementia, depression, headaches, memory loss, and mood swings. There is no cure, and it only gets worse with time. This is the number one issue in sports, so every week we'll be updating you on what is happening in the world of concussion prevention. So this week we have a little bit of a larger story on athletes furthering concussion research via the Toronto Star. So 4 high-profile Canadian athletes have pledged their brains for research into how concussions affect women once they pass. This includes Olympic bronze medal rugby star Jen Kish, who has suffered 5 concussions over her 13-year career. She told the Toronto Star that she is turning 30 this summer and is already having memory deficit problems and slurring her words, despite the fact that she is supposedly in her prime. So Kish is one of 4 women who will donate their brains to Toronto Western Hospital, Canadian Concussion Center to further research on this subject. She is joined by 2-time Olympic gold medalist Cassie Campbell-Pascal, Olympic champion Karen Lee Gartner, and veteran hockey player Fran Ryder. What's really cool here is the focus on women's brains. It's not something we talk about too often. So far, the Canadian Concussion Center has collected just 44 brains of deceased athletes, and all were men. So Campbell-Pascal, who is an analyst for Hockey Night in Canada currently, for instance, was skeptical at first because she figured that these doctors were retrending old stereotypes about women. But after spending a day at the hospital that was dedicated to concussions in female athletes, she changed her mind. This is what she told the Toronto Star. The fact is we don't know what the differences are because a lot of the research has been done on men. I thought I'd better put my brain where my mouth is. So what's interesting here is, and Dr. Charles Tater, the center's director, put it this way. He said that current research suggests women in collision sports like rugby or hockey suffer concussions at a higher rate than their male counterparts, and that recovery often can take longer for female athletes. And the way to solve this problem would require more female athletes in both short-term and long-term research. So this is interesting because we talk about how we are all still learning about concussions. It's all still relatively new science, and brains are complicated. We talk about it. No brain is the same, and it makes sense that man's brain and a woman's brain are probably different, just in the science and the makeup of it. So if we're going to learn more about all types of concussions, not just male athletes, then we also need to study women's brains as well.
No, this is awesome because you're right. Like, there are so many differences between men and women physically, and I can totally believe that concussions take longer to heal in women. So I think this is a really good move. I think more women players should be doing this. It's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think it's just also researchers themselves actually trying to do different types of research as well. Because I think right now it's just all the major stories are around men's sports. And it just, so happens that men's sports have higher ratings.
Yeah, they're more popular,
exactly.
For sure.
So the discussion is out there a little more. And for instance, this is the first time we're talking about this.
Yeah.
And so it's cool that we can now change that and hopefully advance the subject as well, because we just need to study concussions more, period, in all types of people.
Right. Like, if we've already hit men, we've already hit children to some extent. It's probably a good idea to look at the differences between genders as well.
Yeah, because, the simple factor is we're all still learning about the brain.
Yeah.
So
this is all very new.
So hopefully we'll be able to keep everyone updated on what's happening with just concussion research in this area, as well, just a period.
Absolutely. All right, that was it for our concussion update. Now we're going to move on to our discussion for the day. So Alex spoke with Jerry Luliano of GForceTracker about using technology to maximize player safety and quantify potential risk of injury. GForceTracker is based here in the Greater Toronto area, and it's currently being used by teams of nearly all major sports throughout North America. So let's tune in.
So we started at this, probably around 5 or 6 years ago now, really focused at the research aspect of the device and working with researchers to reenact head impact and head trauma in labs, and then working with research. And we still do that. We still work with a lot of the universities on research specific to head trauma. That's number one. The middle part would be impacts, and really that's where we're monitoring and measuring head impacts and that the athlete is seeing, the frequency of those impacts, the severity of those impacts, location of those impacts, and also performance from the same device. What we're doing is monitoring performance aspects, things like exertion and player load, mechanical load that the body's seeing, explosive power events. These would be high levels of acceleration or deceleration, and also intensity. And all of those, both impacts and performance, are done in real time.
Okay, got it. So, how did you become involved with GForceTracker? What was it that led you to explore this specific aspect of sport and then sport technology?
So we're an electronics company, and myself and my partner, Paul Walker, business partner, we're both ex-hockey players. And to be honest, when the Sidney Crosby concussion happened and all of sport was in awe that its best player was, all of a sudden not able to play, we had technology that we had worked on. And Paul simply we came to each other and said, hey, couldn't we adopt something very similar to the technology we've already gotten and be able to monitor these impacts, to be able to understand what's happening? And that's how it started. And we took a lot of that technology that we'd already had implemented in different parts of and different systems and incorporated into this product. We worked very closely with a renowned researcher in the U.S. To identify exactly what we needed to define the product, And then we implemented it around about 5 or 6 years ago.
Got it. Okay. So it's kind of, I mean, I think most hockey fans remember the Sidney Crosby concussion, many concussion problems. And it's definitely something that Mandy and I have been, ringing the bell on how important concussions are. So how vital is it to you that teams just across all sports adopt technology that's going to help with dealing with, injuries like concussions?
Sure. I think it's very, very important. There's nothing that can prevent concussion. This device will not prevent it. There's probably nothing out there that can. Even helmets can't prevent concussion. But one of the things that we've done is to implement kind of an impact DNA of the players to be able to identify, the frequency of those impacts. We've got a study being done with the University of in Canada here that's actually looking at different plays that are being run. It's specific to football. This is different plays that are being run and the different impacts or traumas being seen by different positional players to be able to actually augment some of their drills that are being done in practice, for instance, and just to be able to learn about tendencies from a particular player, either playing on the left side of the line or the right side of the line and leading with their head or doing certain things. It's almost becoming a training tool as well for a lot of these players. So it's just mining the data and being able to mine that data to make the sport safer.
Okay, got it. So when you look at sport as a whole, and whether it be, the NFL, CFL, NHL, NBA, whatever, what do any leagues or any teams impress you with the work that they've done in regards to head injuries, or is it still just everyone's still trying to figure out how concussions can be, dealt with and et cetera?
Yeah, I think everyone's trying to figure it out. I mean, we've seen a lot of different leagues do different things. I think that at the pro level, that'll be a lot more difficult to be able to monitor and mine this data. Mind you, you're collecting a lot of data on some of these athletes now, and there at some point there will be a discussion around who owns the data and how can the data be used, et cetera. But I think, much like, and we kind of you make the analogy on a speedometer in a car. When the first car came out, there was no speedometer to monitor your speed, and now you wouldn't even think of buying a car without a speedometer. So I think it's coming. I think that there still are some leagues that are kind of in denial, and a lot of it has to do with money, of course. And but I think it's going to come around. It has to. I don't think we'll be looking back 10 years from now, and wondering why we didn't implement this a little earlier.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about how if the Sidney Crosby concussion didn't get the ball rolling, for instance, in the NHL, I don't know what it's going to take. Like maybe does Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews need to also get a concussion for this to type thing?
Yeah, let's hope not. But I think I think it's going to be there. I mean, everyone's trying to figure it out still, and everyone's doing their part. We've come a long way. I've seen it just in a short period of time, in 5 years, with all of the research that's coming out, all of the work's being done on diagnosis and work being done on attempting to diagnose CTE in a living being, for instance. That work's incredible. It's being done, and 5 years ago, what you wouldn't even think of anything like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, are there any teams that GForceTracker has been working with that you can talk about?
Yeah, definitely. So we've been working with the University of Western Ontario's football team now for the last 5 years, and have done a number of different papers have been written and so on, and a lot of research with both their kinesiology team specific to football, but also around soccer and rugby, and have been collaborating very, very closely on different research aspects. There's others in the U.S. as well that we've been doing, for things like lacrosse and football, of course, and hockey and soccer and rugby. So just across a number of sport. But our Western engagement's probably our longest one, and we're very close with that team there in London.
Got it. So, how accessible is this tracker? Like, are we able to go down to the high school level or even middle school level with this tracker?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it already is there. We have a number of schools that have adopted the program in both in the U.S. and in Canada, and it's accessible as long as the schools have the funds to be able to pay for a sensor. The sensor is not expensive. It's typically about $100 per unit per year for the devices. And that allows you to that allows your real-time viewing and your analytics and all your cloud data, where you're able to mine additional data from the devices.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. No. So, do you think at some point then, when you're looking at youth sports, that those leagues and those schools are going to start to have to really be allocating in their budget for keeping into account these types of technologies? Just for instance, on the podcast, we spoke about how I read a report from Portland that said that most high schools, for instance, could expect almost one concussion a month in their school if they had at least 150, student athletes.
Wow.
So is this something that most schools are going to have to start paying attention to?
Yeah, I think so, and leagues as well. You know, we've been speaking to some school boards in the U.S. and some leagues in the U.S. as well, and they're concerned about the enrollment in their sport specific to football, and a lot of them are trying to understand how they can reverse that trend. A lot of them are putting the onus on safety and being able to monitor athletes and do those types of things. So I think that it's going to happen, and I think it's going to happen faster now as we're starting to see some of these schools start allocating some funds specific to player safety and player performance as well. Okay,
got it. So just as a kind of last question, how can coaches, teams, schools, leagues, etc., how could they get involved with GForceTracker?
Well, our website's probably the best place to go. It's www.gforcetracker.com. There's a lot of information on our website specific to how it works and how you can purchase an item today, for instance.
Well, that's it for today's episode. Thanks to everyone who listened. Just a reminder that we're also now in a daily format if you'd rather listen to us that way. This was episode 43, which is incredible. You can follow us on Twitter at ITV Tech and Sports, or our personal accounts at Mandy V. Kovacs and Alex T. Radu. So once again, thank you to everyone who listened. We appreciate it.